The next morning, guards came for Sarah before the sun was up. They were different from the ones she had seen before. These guards were bigger and stronger, with thick armor covering their changing skin. They did not speak to her, just opened her cell and pointed down a long hallway. Sarah walked where they told her to go. The hallway was dark, lit only by the same crystal lights she had in her cell. Her feet were bare now because the guards had taken her boots. The floor was cold and rough under her skin. They walked for a long time, going deeper and deeper into the ground. Sarah could feel the weight of rock and earth above her head. Finally, they reached a huge round room with a high ceiling. In the center of the room was a deep pit, maybe 30 feet wide and just as deep. Around the pit were seats carved from crystal, where dozens of aliens sat watching. Queen Vexthara was there too, sitting on a throne that looked like it was made of silver metal and purple gems. She wore a crown that moved and shifted like liquid metal on her head. When Sarah entered the room, all the aliens turned to look at her. "Human Sarah Chun," the queen announced, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. "You will now face the first trial of Jektar. In this pit lives a creature we call the Shadow Beast. It feeds on fear and terror. Many of our strongest warriors have faced this beast. Some died. Others went mad. All of them were changed forever." Sarah looked down into the pit. At first, she could not see anything. It was dark down there, darker than any night she had ever seen on Earth. But slowly, her eyes got used to the darkness, and she began to see movement. Something big was down there, something that seemed to be made of darkness itself. "You may choose weapons," one of the guards said, pointing to a table covered with alien swords and guns. "Or you may go down empty-handed. It makes no difference to the beast." Sarah looked at the weapons. She had trained with guns and knives during her military service before becoming a diplomat. But something told her that weapons would not help her here. Instead, she walked to the edge of the pit and looked down again. "I will go without weapons," she said. The aliens in the seats began to whisper among themselves. Sarah could not understand their language, but she could hear the surprise in their voices. No one had ever chosen to face the Shadow Beast without weapons before. A crystal platform lowered from the ceiling. Sarah stepped onto it, and it carried her down into the darkness of the pit. As she got closer to the bottom, she could smell something strange. It smelled like fear itself, like the worst nightmare you ever had. The platform touched the ground, and Sarah stepped off. The walls of the pit were smooth crystal, impossible to climb. There was no way out except to face whatever was waiting for her in the dark. She heard it before she saw it. A low sound, like breathing, but also like wind blowing through empty caves. Then the darkness in front of her began to move and take shape. The Shadow Beast was huge, maybe 12 feet tall, with long arms that ended in claws. Its body seemed to be made of black smoke that never stayed the same shape for more than a few seconds. But the worst part was its eyes. They glowed red in the darkness, and when Sarah looked into them, she saw all her worst fears. She saw Earth burning. She saw her family dying. She saw herself failing at everything she had ever tried to do. The beast stepped closer, and Sarah felt terror like she had never felt before. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her hand shook. Every part of her body wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then she remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was little, and afraid of monsters in her closet. "Fear is just a feeling, Sarah," her grandmother had said. "It cannot hurt you unless you let it. And sometimes, the thing you are afraid of is more afraid of you than you are of it." Sarah took a deep breath and looked at the Shadow Beast again. This time, she tried to see past the fear it was making her feel. She tried to see the creature itself, not the nightmare it was showing her. "You are trapped down here too, are not you?" she said softly. The beast stopped moving. Its red eyes flickered like candles in the wind. "How long have you been in this pit?" Sarah asked, taking a small step forward. "How long since you saw the sun or felt grass under your feet?" The beast made a sound that might have been a whimper. For the first time, Sarah realized that this creature was not evil. It was just hungry and alone and scared. "I know what it feels like to be trapped," Sarah said, sitting down on the ground. "I know what it feels like to be far from home." She began to hum a song her mother used to sing to her. It was a simple song about stars and space and finding your way home. The shadow beast tilted its head, listening. Up above, Queen Vexthar watched in amazement. In 1,000 years of trials, no one had ever tried to talk to the beast. No one had ever shown it kindness. The beast moved closer to Sarah, but not to attack. It sat down too, like a huge dog. Sarah kept humming and slowly reached out her hand. The beast's smoky body felt warm, like a summer night. "You miss your home too," Sarah said. "Do not you?" The beast nodded, and for a moment, Sarah could swear she saw tears in those red eyes. A platform lowered from above. Sarah stood up and stepped onto it, but she looked back at the beast. "Maybe someday," she said, "we can both go home." As the platform carried her up, Sarah could hear the beast making a new sound. It was not the sound of hunger or fear anymore. It was the sound of hope. The second trial came immediately after the first. This time, Sarah found herself on a narrow bridge that stretched across a canyon filled with fire. The bridge was only 3 feet wide, and it seemed to be made of the same fire that burned below it. "Cross the bridge," Queen Vexthar commanded. "But know that the fire will show you visions of your greatest fears." Most who tried this trial turn back before they are halfway across. Those who do not turn back often jump into the flames to escape the visions. Sarah looked at the bridge. It was maybe 100 feet long, and the fire below burned bright orange and red. She could already feel the heat on her face. She took her first step onto the bridge. The fire bridge held her weight, but it was hot under her bare feet. After just a few steps, the visions began. She saw Earth under attack by alien ships. She saw her brother being killed in the war. She saw her parents crying over her empty grave. She saw humanity enslaved and broken. The visions were so real that Sarah almost believed them. She stopped walking and put her hands over her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The fire below called to her, promising an end to the pain and fear. But then Sarah remembered why she was here. She was not just Sarah Chun anymore. She was the voice of humanity. She was hope for peace between the stars. And even if these visions came true, even if Earth burned and her family died, giving up now would not change anything. She took another step forward, then another. The visions got worse, but Sarah kept walking. She thought about all the people on Earth who were counting on her. She thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy at peace if she could just keep walking, step by step. With tears on her face and pain in her heart, Sarah crossed the bridge of fire. When she reached the other side, she fell to her knees, exhausted. But she had made it. She had passed 2 trials that had broken countless warriors. Queen Vexthar stared down at the small human woman. Something was changing in the queen's mind, something she did not understand yet. This human had just done something impossible, and she had done it with tears on her face and love in her heart. Sarah Chun sat on the cold crystal floor and looked at her hands. They were dirty now, covered in dust from the strange purple walls of her prison cell. 3 days ago, she had been wearing her best blue uniform, shaking hands with alien diplomats on their beautiful planet. Now she was locked up deep under the ground, waiting to die. The cell walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed softly in the dark. Sarah could see through them, but she could not break them. She had tried pushing, hitting, and even screaming at them. Nothing worked. The crystal was stronger than any metal she had ever seen on Earth. Outside her cell, she could hear footsteps. heavy footsteps that belonged to the guards. They were not human footsteps. These guards had 4 legs instead of 2, and they made clicking sounds when they walked. Sarah had seen them when they first brought her here. They were tall, with skin that changed colors like a rainbow, and eyes that looked like black diamonds. The footsteps stopped in front of her cell. Sarah looked up and saw her coming. Queen Vexthara, the ruler of this whole planet and many others. Sarah had only met her once before, during the peace talks that had gone so wrong. The queen was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She was almost 8 feet tall, with long arms and fingers that ended in sharp points. Her skin shifted from blue to purple to green as she moved. Her face was almost human, but her eyes were too big and too dark. When she spoke, her voice sounded like music and thunder mixed together. "Human," the queen said, and the crystal wall became clear like glass. "You have been my guest for 3 days. Are you ready to talk?" Sarah stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff from sitting on the hard floor. But she did not want to look weak in front of the queen. She brushed the dust off her hands and looked directly into those dark eyes. "I told you already," Sarah said. "I cannot tell you where Earth is. I cannot tell you about our ships or our weapons. And I will not beg you to let me go." The queen's skin changed to a deep red color. In her culture, red meant anger or surprise. Sarah had studied their people for months before coming here. She knew that the queen was not used to prisoners who talked back to her. "You are very small," the queen said, walking around the cell like a big cat. "Your people are weak. You have no claws, no natural weapons. Your skin is soft and easy to cut. Your bones break like sticks. Yet you sit in my prison and refuse to obey me. Why?" Sarah felt tired. She had not slept well on the crystal floor. Her stomach was empty because the alien food made her sick. Her uniform was torn and dirty. But she stood straight and kept looking at the queen. "Because I have a job to do," Sarah said. "I came here to make peace between your people and mine. You chose to make me a prisoner instead. But I still have my job. I still have to protect my people." The queen stopped walking. Her skin changed to yellow, which Sarah knew meant confusion or curiosity. "Protect them?" the queen asked. "You are one small human, locked in a cell, far from your home world. How can you protect anyone?" "By not giving you what you want," Sarah said simply. The queen stared at her for a long moment. In all her years as a ruler, she had never met a prisoner like this one. Usually, when someone was brought to these cells, they did one of 2 things. They either screamed and fought and tried to escape, or they cried and begged for mercy. This human did neither. Sarah just sat back down on the floor, crossed her legs, and closed her eyes. She began to breathe slowly and deeply, the way she had learned in meditation classes back on Earth. She tried to think of home, of the green trees and blue oceans, of her family and friends. "What are you doing?" the queen demanded. "Staying calm," Sarah said without opening her eyes. "Getting ready for whatever you plan to do to me next." The queen's skin turned almost black with anger. No prisoner had ever ignored her like this before. She was the most powerful being on this planet. She commanded armies that could destroy whole star systems. She had conquered dozens of worlds and hundreds of species. And this tiny human was sitting there with her eyes closed like none of that mattered. "You think you are brave," the queen said, her voice getting louder. "But I will show you what real fear looks like. Tomorrow, you will face the trials of Jektar. These are tests that have killed every alien who ever tried them. They will break your mind and your body. They will show you that humans are nothing special." Sarah opened her eyes and looked up at the queen. There was no fear in her face, no anger, no hate. Just a kind of sad understanding. "Maybe they will," Sarah said. Maybe I will die tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. But that will not change anything. My ship will not come back for me. Your people will not learn where Earth is. And somewhere out there, other humans will keep doing their jobs, just like I am doing mine." The Queen stared down at this impossible human. She had expected Sarah to break by now, to start crying or screaming or begging. Instead, Sarah seemed to get calmer every day. It made no sense. "Why do you care so much about people you will never see again?" the Queen asked. "Why do you suffer for strangers?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, just a little. "Because they are not strangers," she said. "They are my people. And you take care of your people, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when you are scared." The Queen's skin turned white, which meant shock. She had never heard anyone talk about their own species like that. In her world, you were strong or you were weak. You won or you lost. You lived or you died. But this human talked about something else. Something the Queen did not understand. "Tomorrow," the Queen said finally, "we will see how brave you really are." She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the crystal corridors. Sarah watched her go, then closed her eyes again and went back to her meditation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, maybe even death. But tonight, she would think of Earth, and she would stay strong for all the people she might never see again. After the trials, the guards brought Sarah to a different cell. This one was bigger and had a real bed instead of just a crystal floor. There was also a window, though it only looked out at more crystal walls. But it was still better than the dark pit she had been in before. Sarah lay on the bed and tried to rest. Her feet still hurt from walking on the fire bridge, and her mind was tired from facing the shadow beast. But she could not sleep. Something about the trials bothered her, something she could not quite understand. Why had the Queen seemed so surprised when Sarah passed the tests? Most aliens probably failed because they tried to fight their way through. But the Queen was smart. She must have known that fighting was not always the answer. So why did she look so shocked when Sarah chose a different path? That night, Sarah heard voices in the hallway outside her cell. The crystal walls were thick, but if she pressed her ear against them, she could hear some words. The aliens were speaking in their own language, but Sarah had learned enough of it during the peace talks to understand pieces of what they said. 3 more worlds lost, one voice said. It sounded like a melee and maybe one of the Queen's advisors. How many ships? Asked another voice. All of them. The entire 4th Fleet. Gone in less than 6 hours. Sarah pressed closer to the wall. Ships lost? Fleets destroyed? This sounded like the Queen's people were fighting a war, but they had never mentioned any war during the peace talks. The Queen grows desperate, the first voice said. That is why she tests the humans so hard. She hopes their species might fight differently than we do. Different how? I do not know. But our way is failing. Pure strength, pure strategy, pure logic. None of it works against the Devourers. They adapt too quickly. We need allies who think in ways we cannot. The voices moved away down the hall, but Sarah had heard enough. The Devourers. She did not know what that meant, but it sounded terrifying. And the Queen was not testing her out of cruelty or curiosity. She was looking for help. The next morning, Queen Vextara came to Sarah's cell again. This time, she did not look angry or proud. She looked tired, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. You did well in the trials, the Queen said. Better than I expected. Thank you, Sarah replied. But she was studying the Queen's face. Though I get the feeling that was not really about testing my courage. The Queen's skin changed to that yellow color that meant surprise. What do you mean? Sarah sat up on her bed and looked directly at the Queen. "I heard your people talking last night. 3 worlds lost. Your 4th fleet destroyed. You are fighting a war, are not you? And you are losing." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. Her skin cycled through several colors: yellow, red, purple, and finally a deep blue that Sarah had never seen before. She did not know what blue meant in their culture, but it looked like sadness. "You are more clever than I gave you credit for," the Queen said, finally. "Yes, we are at war. We have been at war for almost 50 years now. And yes, we are losing. Who are you fighting?" The Queen was quiet for so long that Sarah thought she might not answer. Then she waved her hand, and the crystal wall became transparent. Through it, Sarah could see a large room filled with star maps and battle plans. "Come," the Queen said. "If you are going to know, you should know everything." Guards escorted Sarah to the war room. It was bigger than anything she had seen on this planet, with a ceiling so high she could barely see it. The walls were covered with maps of space, showing hundreds of star systems connected by lines of light. But what drew Sarah's attention were the dark areas on the maps. Large sections where the lights had gone out, where whole systems were marked with red symbols that probably meant destroyed or lost. "The Void Devourers," the Queen said, pointing to the dark areas. "That is what we call them, though we do not know their real name. They appeared 50 years ago at the edge of our territory. At first, we thought they were just another alien species trying to expand their borders." The Queen touched one of the maps, and it zoomed in to show a single star system. Sarah could see planets and moons and space stations, all connected by the thin lines that probably showed trade routes and communication networks. "We sent diplomats first, like you humans did with us," the Queen continued. "The diplomats never came back. So we sent scientists to study them. The scientists never came back either. Finally, we sent warships." The map changed, showing the battle. Sarah watched as hundreds of small dots, probably representing ships, moved through space toward a larger dark mass. At first, it looked like the alien ships were winning. They surrounded the dark mass and began attacking it. But then the dark mass began to change. It split into smaller pieces that moved faster than the alien ships. Within minutes, all the small dots disappeared from the map. "They do not just destroy," the Queen said quietly. "They consume. They eat everything. Ships, planets, stars, even space itself. And worst of all, they learn. Every time we fight them, they adapt. Every strategy we use works only once." Sarah stared at the maps, beginning to understand the true size of this threat. "How many worlds have they taken?" 47, the Queen replied, "including 3 of our most important colonies. Billions of people gone. And we cannot stop them. What do they want? We do not know. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply appear, consume everything in a system, and move on to the next one." Sarah walked around the war room, studying the maps and battle plans. Everything she saw told the same story. The Queen's people were strong and experienced in war. But they were losing because they always fought the same way. They used logic and strategy and overwhelming force. "You think humans might fight differently," Sarah said. It was not a question. The Queen's skin turned that blue color again. "I hope so. Your species is young and weak by our standards. But in the trials, you did things no warrior of our people has ever done. You showed kindness to the Shadow Beast. You crossed the fire bridge not through courage alone, but through love for your people. So this whole thing, capturing me, the trials, even this conversation, it has all been a job interview." The Queen looked confused. "Job interview? You are trying to decide if you want to hire humans to help you fight this war." Yes, I suppose that is accurate. Sarah continued walking around the room, thinking. She stopped in front of a map that showed the current position of the Void Devourers. They were maybe 20 star systems away from Queen Vexthara's homeworld. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach this planet in less than 10 years. What makes you think humans can help? Sarah asked. We do not have big fleets or powerful weapons. We have never fought in space before. Because, the Queen said, in 1,000 years of trials, no one has ever passed them the way you did. No one has ever shown mercy to the Shadow Beast. No one has ever crossed the fire bridge while crying for others instead of themselves. Your species thinks with your hearts as well as your minds. Perhaps that is what we need. Sarah turned to look at the Queen. For the first time since her capture, she saw this alien not as an enemy or a captor, but as someone who was scared and desperate and trying to save her people. If I help you, Sarah said slowly, what happens to the peace talks? What happens to the relationship between our species? If you help us win this war, the Queen replied, there will be peace between us forever. Your people will be honored as the allies who saved the galaxy. And if we lose? The Queen's skin turned black. Then there will be no one left to remember any of us. Sarah looked at the maps again, at all those dark areas where entire civilizations had been consumed. She thought about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans, about her family and friends who had no idea this threat existed. I cannot speak for my government, she said finally, but I can tell you what I think. Humans do not abandon their friends, and we do not let bullies destroy innocent people if we can stop them. Then you will help? Sarah met the Queen's dark eyes. First, you have to let me contact my ship. My people need to know what is really happening here. And then, she paused, thinking about everything she had learned. Then we need to figure out how to fight an enemy that learns from every battle. For the first time since Sarah had met her, Queen Vexthara smiled. It was a strange sight, with too many teeth, but it was still a smile. I think, the Queen said, that your species might surprise us all. 2 days later, Sarah was still in the war room studying maps when the alarms began to sound. The crystal walls flashed red, and a voice spoke in the alien language, fast and panicked. Sarah could only understand a few words, but attack and devourers were clear enough. Queen Vexthara burst into the room, her skin cycling rapidly through colors that Sarah had never seen before. Behind her came a dozen advisors, all talking at once. How did they get so close? The Queen demanded. The sensor net should have detected them days ago. They came through the shadow of the moon, one advisor replied. Small ships, maybe scout vessels, but they are already in the atmosphere. How many? We count at least 50 ships, Your Majesty. They are heading straight for the palace. Sarah moved to one of the windows and looked up at the sky. She could see dark shapes moving between the clouds, ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even from here, they looked wrong somehow, like holes cut in the fabric of reality itself. Your children, Sarah said suddenly, turning to the Queen. Where are your children? The Queen's skin went white with shock. In all the panic of the attack, she had forgotten about her offspring. The royal nursery, she said. Top level of the palace. That is where they will go first, Sarah said. The Devourers. They will target your family to break your spirit. The guards will protect them, the Queen said, but Sarah could hear the doubt in her voice. As if to answer that doubt, explosions began to echo through the palace. The crystal walls shook, and somewhere above them, Sarah could hear the sound of energy weapons firing. Your Majesty, a guard captain ran into the room. The Devourers have breached the upper levels. They are moving toward the royal quarters. And he paused, his skin turning gray with fear. They are not like anything we have faced before. Our weapons barely slowed them down. The Queen looked around the room at her advisors and guards. Sarah could see the fear in their faces, the knowledge that their most secure fortress was falling around them. "Evacuate the palace," the Queen ordered. "All non-essential personnel to the emergency shelters. Military units fall back to defensive positions around the crystal core." "What about the royal nursery?" Sarah asked. "Elite guard unit will handle the evacuation," the Queen replied, but her voice shook as she said it. More explosions rocked the palace. The lights flickered, and Sarah could smell smoke in the air. Through the window, she could see more Devourer ships landing on the palace grounds. "Your Majesty," another guard ran in. "The elite unit is cut off. The Devourers have surrounded the upper levels. There is no way to reach the royal quarters." Sarah saw the Queen's face change. All the royal pride and dignity fell away, replaced by the terror of a mother whose children were in danger. For a moment, Queen Vexthara was just another parent, desperate to save her family. "How long until the main fleet arrives?" the Queen asked. "4 hours, Your Majesty. Maybe 5. "The children do not have 4 hours," Sarah said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Sarah walked to the center of the room where a holographic map showed the palace layout. She could see the royal quarters at the top, surrounded by red dots that represented Devourer forces. "There," she said, pointing to a maintenance shaft that ran through the center of the palace. "If someone could get into that shaft, they could reach the royal quarters without going through the main hallways." "That shaft is barely wide enough for one person," an advisor said, "and it is full of energy conduits. One wrong move, and you would be electrocuted." Also, another advisor added, the Devourers would sense anyone trying to use it. "They can detect life signs through solid crystal." Sarah studied the map more carefully. There was something her meditation training on Earth had taught her, something about controlling her body's energy and making herself invisible to certain types of sensors. She had never tried it against alien technology, but they detect life signs by reading fear and stress, right? Sarah asked. "Among other things, yes," the Queen replied. "Why?" "Because I might know a way to hide from them." Before anyone could stop her, Sarah was moving toward the door. The Queen caught her arm. "You cannot go up there," the Queen said. "You are not a soldier. You have no weapons, no armor, no training for this kind of battle." Sarah looked at the Queen's hand on her arm, then up at the Queen's face. "Your Majesty, with respect, I do not think weapons and armor are going to help against these creatures. You have been fighting them with strength and strategy for 50 years, and you are still losing. Then, what do you propose?" "I propose we try something they have never seen before," Sarah said. "I propose we try love." The Queen's skin cycled through several colors of confusion. "I do not understand." "You will," Sarah said gently, removing the Queen's hand from her arm. "But first, I need you to show me how to get to that maintenance shaft." 10 minutes later, Sarah was crawling through a narrow crystal tube that ran through the heart of the palace. The walls around her hummed with energy, and she could feel electricity crackling just inches from her face. But she moved slowly and carefully, breathing deeply and keeping her mind calm. She could hear the battle above her. Energy weapons firing, explosions, the sound of crystal walls breaking. But she tried not to think about that. Instead, she thought about the Queen's children, alone and scared in their nursery while monsters hunted them. The maintenance shaft ended at a small access panel near the royal quarters. Sarah pushed it open slowly and looked out. The hallway was full of smoke and debris. At the far end, she could see dark shapes moving, the Devourers. They were even more terrifying up close than they had looked in the war room projections. They seemed to be made of living shadow, with tentacles that reached out from their bodies like grasping fingers. Where they touched the crystal walls, the walls turned black and began to dissolve. Sarah slipped out of the shaft and pressed herself against the wall. The Devourers had not noticed her yet, but she could feel them trying to sense her presence. She closed her eyes and did something she had learned during her meditation training. She made her mind very quiet and her heart very calm. She thought about peaceful things: grass growing, rain falling, stars shining in empty space. To her amazement, it worked. The Devourers moved past her without stopping. Their attention focused on some other part of the palace. Sarah reached the nursery door and found it locked. But the lock was electronic, and the Devourer attack had disrupted the power systems. She was able to force the door open and slip inside. The nursery was beautiful, with walls that showed moving pictures of alien forests and seas. But Sarah barely noticed the decorations. Her attention was focused on the far corner of the room, where a pile of broken crystal beams had trapped 3 small figures underneath. The Queen's children were young, maybe equivalent to human 6 or 7-year-olds. They had the same color-changing skin as their mother, but right now they were all pale gray with fear. 2 of them were unconscious, and the third was trying to lift a crystal beam that was far too heavy for her small arms. "Hey," Sarah said softly, approaching slowly so she would not scare them. "It is okay. I am here to help." The conscious child looked up at her with huge dark eyes. "You are the human," she said in a voice like wind chimes. "Mother told us about you." "That is right," Sarah said, kneeling beside the trapped children. "What is your name?" "Zixara," the child replied. "These are my brothers, Vex and Vrenko. They are hurt." Sarah could see that the 2 boys were badly injured. One had a cut on his head that was leaking blue blood. The other was having trouble breathing. "We need to get you out of here," Sarah said, putting her hands under one of the crystal beams. "Can you help me lift?" Together, Sarah and Zixara managed to move enough debris to free the 2 boys. But as they worked, Sarah could hear sounds in the hallway outside. The Devourers were coming back. "Is there another way out of this room?" Sarah asked. Zixara pointed to a wall panel. "Emergency exit. But it leads to the garden, and the garden is full of the dark things." Sarah looked around the room. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. In a few minutes, the Devourers would break down the door and find them all. She made a decision that surprised even her. "Zixara," she said, "I need you to get behind that bookshelf with your brothers. Do not come out no matter what you hear." "Okay, what are you going to do?" "I am going to protect you," Sarah said simply. The nursery door exploded inward, and 3 Devourers flowed into the room like liquid shadow. Sarah stood up and placed herself between the monsters and the children. For a moment, the Devourers paused. They had expected to find fear here, terror and desperation that they could feed on. Instead, they found a small human woman standing calmly in the center of the room, her arms spread wide. "You cannot have them," Sarah said quietly. The Devourers moved forward, their tentacles reaching out to touch her. But when they made contact with Sarah's body, something strange happened. Instead of the fear and hatred they usually consumed, they found something else. They found love, pure, selfless love that asked for nothing in return. It burned them like acid. They pulled back, confused and hurt. Sarah stepped forward, still keeping herself between the monsters and the children. She began to think about everyone she had ever loved, her parents, her brother, her friends on Earth. Sarah woke up in a room filled with warm light and the sound of gentle music. For a moment, she could not remember where she was or what had happened. Then the pain hit her. Deep cuts across her chest and arms, bruises that covered most of her body, and a terrible tiredness that went all the way down to her bones. "You are awake," said a soft voice beside her bed. Sarah turned her head and saw Queen Vexthara sitting in a chair next to her. The queen looked different somehow. Her skin was a steady, gentle blue color that Sarah had never seen before, and her eyes were sad, grateful? It was hard to tell. "Your children," Sarah said, her voice rough and weak. "Are they?" "They are safe," the Queen said quickly. "All three of them. Zixara has barely left your side since we brought you here. She keeps telling everyone that you saved them from the dark things." Sarah tried to sit up, but her body would not cooperate. Every muscle hurt, and her head felt dizzy. "How long have I been unconscious?" 3 days, the Queen replied. "Our doctors were not sure you would live. Your body took terrible damage from the Devourer attack, but you kept fighting even while unconscious. Your heart rate stayed strong, as if you were still protecting someone. Did we win? Did your fleet drive them off?" The Queen's expression grew complicated. "Yes and no. The scout ships retreated when our main fleet arrived. But Sarah," the Queen leaned forward in her chair, "something happened in that nursery. Something that has never happened before in 50 years of war." "What do you mean?" "The Devourers that attacked you, they did not just retreat. They fled. Our sensors detected something like panic in their movements. And when our scientists examined the nursery afterward, they found something impossible." Sarah waited for the Queen to continue. The walls where the Devourers had touched them, instead of being consumed and dissolved, they were healing. The crystal was growing back, stronger than before. Whatever you did in that room, it did not just stop them. It reversed their power. Sarah thought about those final moments in the nursery, about the feeling of love burning in her chest like a star. "I do not understand it either," she said honestly. "I think I am beginning to," the Queen said softly. "For 50 years, we have fought the Devourers with weapons and strategies and logic. We attacked them with our minds. But you fought them with your heart." The Queen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Sarah could see alien gardens with crystal trees and flowers that glowed like small suns. "I have been a ruler for over 300 years, the Queen said. "I have conquered worlds and commanded fleets and made decisions that affected billions of lives. I thought I understood strength. I thought I understood courage. And now?" The Queen turned back to Sarah. "Now I realize that everything I thought I knew about strength was wrong. You are smaller than any of my warriors. You have no claws, no natural weapons, no enhanced abilities. By every measure my people understand, you should be weak. But you face 3 Devourers with nothing but love in your heart, and you drove them away. You did something that our strongest warriors, our most advanced weapons, our best strategies could never accomplish. You made them afraid." Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. "It was not really me," she said finally. "It was one I was protecting. When I saw those children trapped and scared, I could not let anything hurt them. It did not matter that they were not human. It did not matter that I barely knew them. They were children, and they needed someone to stand between them and the monsters." "That," said the Queen, "is exactly what I mean." The door to the room opened, and Sarah heard the sound of small footsteps. Zixara peeked around the doorframe, her skin cycling through nervous colors. "Is she really awake?" the little alien asked. "Come here, small one," Sarah said, smiling. Zixar ran to the bed and carefully climbed up to sit beside Sarah. "You saved us," she said. "The dark things were going to hurt me and my brothers, but you stopped them. You were very brave too," Sarah said. "You helped me move those heavy stones to free Dex and Vrenko. Mother says you are going to help us fight the dark things in space too," Zixara said. "Is that true?" Sarah looked at the Queen. "Is that true? Have you contacted my people?" "I have," the Queen said. "I spoke directly with your Earth leaders 3 days ago. I told them everything, about the Devourers, about what you did here, about what I think your species could teach us. And they are sending ships, the Queen said, her skin brightening to a warm gold color. Not warships. They do not have any that could match ours in battle. But they are sending what they call humanitarian vessels. Ships full of doctors and teachers and engineers. And she paused, looking almost embarrassed. Families. Families? Your leader said that if we are going to learn to fight with our hearts as well as our minds, we need to understand what it means to have something worth protecting beyond just territory or honor. They are sending human families to live with our families, to teach our children and learn from our children. Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. It was such a human solution, not sending warriors or weapons, but sending the thing humans valued most, their bonds with each other. There is more, the Queen said. Your Captain Martinez, I believe she is your commander. She said something that I cannot stop thinking about. What did she say? She said that humans have a saying, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and doing what is right anyway. She said that is what you showed us in the nursery. Queen Vexthara walked back to Sarah's bedside and sat down again. For 50 years, my people have been trying to defeat the Devourers by being fearless. We trained our emotions out of our soldiers. We taught them to feel nothing, to think only of victory and defeat. But that is not courage, Sarah said, understanding. That is just emptiness. Exactly. And the Devourers could not feed on our fearless warriors, but they could not be defeated by them either. Because our warriors had nothing inside them worth protecting. They fought for duty, for orders, for abstract concepts like honor and territory. But humans fight for each other. Yes, the Queen said. And that makes all the difference. Zixara had fallen asleep, curled up next to Sarah, her small hand holding onto Sarah's arm. The Queen reached over and gently stroked her daughter's hair. I want to tell you something, the Queen said quietly. Something I have never told anyone before. Okay, when I first became queen, I had to make a choice. I could rule through love or through fear. I chose fear because it seemed stronger, more reliable. Love seemed weak, unpredictable. The Queen's skin turned that deep blue color again. Sadness. I spent 300 years building an empire based on strength and logic and controlled emotion. And it worked for a time. We conquered worlds, we built great fleets, we became the most powerful force in this part of the galaxy. But then the Devourers came. Yes, and all our strength was useless. All our logic was meaningless. Because we had forgotten how to fight for something greater than ourselves. The Queen stood up and walked to a cabinet beside the bed. She opened it and pulled out something that made Sarah's heart skip, her communication device. The one that connected her to her ship. Your Captain Martinez asked me to give this to you when you woke up, the Queen said. She has a message for you. Sarah took the device with shaking hands and activated it. Captain Martinez's face appeared in the small hologram, smiling with relief. Sarah, thank God you are okay. When we got the Queen's message about what you did, the whole crew, well, let us just say there were a lot of tears on the bridge. Maria, Sarah said, so glad to see a familiar face that she started crying herself. It is so good to see you. Listen, I do not have long before this transmission cuts out, but I need you to know something. What you did up there, saving those children, showing the aliens how to fight with love instead of just strategy, it has changed everything. Earth Command is not just sending aid ships. They are proposing a full alliance. An alliance? Human hearts and alien minds working together. We teach them about emotional courage. They teach us about advanced technology. Joint colonies, shared research, combined fleets. A real partnership between species. Sarah looked at Queen Vexthara, who was listening to every word. The Queen has already agreed in principle. Captain Martinez continued. But she wanted to ask you something first. since you are the one who made all this possible. Ask me what? Queen Vexthara stepped closer to the communication device. I want to ask if you would be willing to stay here, at least for a while, to help us learn what you have taught us. To be an ambassador not just between our governments, but between our hearts. Sarah looked down at little Zixara, still sleeping peacefully beside her. She thought about the shadow beast in its lonely pit, about the Queen's desperate search for allies, about all the worlds the Devourers had consumed and all the people who had died. Yes, she said simply, I will stay. The Queen's skin burst into the brightest gold Sarah had ever seen. Pure joy. There is one more thing, Captain Martinez said from the communicator. Earth wants to give you a new title. From now on, you are not just Commander Chun. You are Ambassador Chun, official representative of humanity to the Galactic Alliance. Galactic Alliance? That is what we are calling it, the Queen said. Humans and Veltharians working together.